It was meant to be the trip of a lifetime.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It quickly became a living nightmare.
People have tested positive for coronavirus.
Yeah, we've got to get out of here.
Even if you are sent back to Vancouver or Canada for quarantine, it's better off than stuck in here.
The Diamond Princess cruise ship is carrying over 2,000 passengers as the coronavirus outbreak sweeps through the ship. It turns the luxury cruise liner into a floating prison.
I cannot believe one person can cause 600 and something odd people to get sick.
The level of worries and the mental stress has reached to the maximum now.
As the world reels from COVID-19, we speak to those who are on board the Diamond Princess.
My mind was racing. I was going, what's going to happen? I'm in a little cabin with no windows.
I was so scared of getting COVID-19.
Learning what happened from the people who were there.
News crews are back. They're setting up the tents again.
As the drama unfolded and lives were lost. A 2-week luxury cruise. The Diamond Princess has set sail from the Japanese port of Yokohama, carrying more than 2,000 passengers from over 50 different countries. The ship has traveled over 5,000 miles of ocean and has explored 6 destinations around Southeast Asia, including Vietnam and Taiwan. Many on board are celebrating the Chinese New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Or simply enjoying the holiday of a lifetime.
I see.
Mary Chu and her husband Diju are on board celebrating his 65th birthday.
Is all that I can give to you. Love is more than just a game for two.
We were on the cruise because we want to celebrate my husband's 65th birthday. It's a milestone birthday, so that's what we thought of.
Love you, Mahani.
Love you more, honey.
We've been cruising for more than 15 years, and so far so good. You know what? It's a very efficient and convenient way to go on vacation. You don't have to book a hotel. You don't have to rent a car. Who wouldn't want that?
February the 1st. The passengers are making the most of their last few days at sea. In just 3 days, they'll be back in Yokohama.
Hello, 你好。Ever 飲杯。
order 咗啦。
That night, Hong Kong officials sent an email to the Diamond Princess. It warns that an 80-year-old man who left the ship 6 days ago in Hong Kong has tested positive for the infectious virus COVID-19. A coronavirus outbreak was first flagged as a cause of concern in Wuhan, China, on the 31st of December 2019. The city was quickly shut down in the hope of keeping the virus at bay.
Top story tonight now. 2 major cities in China are in lockdown tonight to try to control the spread of a deadly coronavirus.
Few are aware of the dangers of this deadly virus, including Auna Tan and her family, who had travelled from Australia.
Before we started our trip, it was something that had come up in conversation, so we were aware that that was brewing in China. I really didn't think it was anything more than, say, a flu or a cold, a bad sort of seasonal kind of thing. So we hadn't had the sense that it was getting serious.
When the Diamond Princess set off from Yokohama on the 20th of January, there were less than 300 reported cases of COVID-19 in the world. and only 6 people were known to have died from the virus. Some countries along the ship's route were concerned and began taking temperatures of passengers arriving at their ports. On the 30th of January, the World Health Organization declares a public health emergency. This still doesn't raise alarms for American passenger Mark Jorgensen, who's traveling with his wife Jerry and friends the Goldmans. Mark had a kidney transplant in 2015, which puts him at high risk of developing complications if he is infected with COVID-19.
We were wondering what it was about, still not overly concerned, but we understood they were being cautious. At the previous port in Okinawa, they did some extra screening for us too, so we were kind of used to that. And we just assumed it would be a delay in getting off. We had no idea we were in for the adventure we ended up having.
The cruise liner and its operator, Princess Cruises, are warned that a passenger who recently disembarked in Hong Kong has been diagnosed with COVID-19. The virus could be on board the ship. Unaware, the passengers carry on as normal. It's the last night on board the Diamond Princess.
We were a bit sad that our holiday was obviously coming to an end, and in fact, the day before we arrived back to Yokohama, I had commented to my husband that I wish our holiday could go on for much longer, and I wasn't ready to leave the ship.
It's funny, the night before we got the word we were extending, the 4 of us were talking at dinner, and we asked that very question. We said, "Hey, are you guys ready to go home, or would you like to keep going?" And we all said we're not ready to quit. We were having a good time, and we weren't ready to go home.
There was some kind of gossip. I don't know if there's any truth to that at that time, that there could be a possibility that there was a problem on this. We've been hearing about this COVID virus. We were not really thinking seriously about it.
Despite rumors circulating that a former passenger was infected with COVID-19, the captain keeps the ship open, and passengers continue with an evening of festivities. Two days after the Diamond Princess was warned that a COVID-19 outbreak could be aboard the ship, the bridge finally makes an announcement.
香港の公衆衛生当局からの通知があり、1月20日の横浜から1月25日の香港までの5日間を本船ダイヤモンドプリンセスで過ごした乗客が、下船の6日後にあたる2月1日にコロナウイルス陽性と診断されたことが分かりました。
Following orders from both the Japanese government and Princess Cruises, Captain Armour, a Princess employee for over 20 years, doubles his speed to return to Yokohama a day earlier than planned. Dressed in hazmat suits, Japanese medical officials board the ship. All passengers will now be tested for a fever.
Okay. Did we do okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You.
And asked about symptoms, but notably, only some passengers will be tested for the coronavirus.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You too.
You too.
Bye.
現在、本船の乗客の皆様の体温を測らせていただいているところでございますが、あいにく何時頃終わるかということに関しましては、はっきりとは分かっておりません。
Sit down.
The testing takes 18 hours. The ship is still open for business.
I'm okay.
Trudy Clement, a Canadian passenger, was on board with her husband, Steve.
We still felt removed from it, and things went on as normal. Dining rooms were open, there was no fear on the ship. Still hoping to get off the ship on the scheduled date.
Public health expert Maggie Morris has been studying infections such as swine flu and Ebola for over 25 years.
We had a cruise ship that, in all intents and purposes, was a floating town. The sole purpose really is for people to have a holiday and to socialise and to relax. And this is a semi-enclosed space, essentially, that they're living in. And therefore, the environment is very conducive to a spread of any communicable disease, such as COVID-19. But what we now know about COVID-19 is that it can be spread asymptomatically. If your testing isn't perhaps as rigorous as it might be, actually quite a significant procedure, then it's very possible that in actual fact those that seem to be well were in actual fact going to become unwell soon.
February the 5th, the results are in.
And I remember being in the dining room that night, and the dining room's usually a hectic, crazy, noisy place, and it just went dead silent. And everyone was just looking at each other. There were a few people gasping, and we were kind of stunned, and it was quite an experience.
10 people have tested positive for COVID-19. Thousands of passengers are now trapped on board with a virus no one is able to contain. The Diamond Princess has spent the last 2 weeks travelling around Asia. But a day before the end of the cruise, Captain Armour announces that a coronavirus outbreak has taken place on the ship.
The 10 people have tested positive for coronavirus.
The Diamond Princess is now in lockdown, docked in the Japanese port of Yokohama. Passengers peer over the side of the ship, attempting to see the 10 infected passengers removed. The rest of the holidaymakers have been ordered to their cabins for 14 days. Passenger Ona Tan and her family are in one of the ship's smallest cabins.
So this is our room when you come in from the door. There is the walk-in wardrobe, and this is our area. When the captain finally announced the next morning that we would go into quarantine, I was initially shocked and stunned. My mind was racing. I was going, what's going to happen? We're all stuck in here. I'm in a little cabin with no windows and the four of us. I was going, what are we doing? We're stuck here for 14 days, potentially. I had no idea this was coming.
Mary Chu, a chemical analyst, and her husband Diju are cruise regulars, but this was their first time without windows.
Thought it will just be an extended complimentary cruise, and we were just saying, oh, it will still be the same. We'll be going out for dinner. We can still watch the shows. But then when they said we have to stay in our cabins, it's just feeling like we are in a prison cell.
The Diamond Princess is now holding over 2,000 passengers, 80% of whom are over the age of 60. The age group most vulnerable to COVID-19. The ship does have a medical team on board, but coping with a highly infectious virus like COVID-19 makes their task unduly challenging.
Outbreak of infectious diseases on board ships are not new. They've happened before in the past, including diseases like influenza, diarrheal diseases caused by norovirus, as well as even chickenpox. One reason why infectious disease outbreaks are common on board ships is because of high population density.
So a ship is a semi-closed space. It's also designed so that people can get from one place to another quite quickly. There are a series of corridors and lifts and staircases which are constantly being used by hundreds of people. This is a very serious infection that requires a clinical response, and really the ship has not really been able to respond appropriately in that way.
By now, COVID-19 has spread to over 20 countries, and the death toll is reported to be over 500. But on the ship, it seems the outbreak is small. The day after lockdown begins, another announcement.
I've been notified that amongst the second set of samples that have been completed testing, 10 additional people have tested positive for coronavirus.
Initially, the passengers remain in good spirits.
Áo lệnh là gì ạ? Gì
Sao? Sao chỗ ra xe? No.
I gotta wrap my feet around you. You're too fat.
You can't.
Oh, we played games, we watched movies, we watched the news, we read, we took a lot of naps. We were very fortunate because our friends were in the next cabin and we were able to open the door on our balconies, so we were able to go back and forth between each other's cabins, which in retrospect maybe wasn't the best idea, but it did give us a little bit more space to move around.
We found that if we don't have a set routine, the days sort of start to drag on and it just becomes one long, lethargic kind of feel. So we would do things like little exercises in between. There were even Zumba on the TV that we could follow to do. So sometimes I'd have that on. Before you know it, it's evening and that's pretty much a whole day done.
2 days in, and there are only 20 recorded infections. The Diamond Princess cruise liner releases a statement saying they will continue to work with the Japanese authorities. The Japanese government also decides that the crew will not be quarantined. Primarily from the Philippines, India, and Indonesia, the crew will be expected to work for at least 13 hours a day, going door to door, attending to the guests' needs.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Journalist Suryatapa Bhattacharya has been reporting on the Diamond Princess since it docked on the 3rd of February.
So some crew were reassigned to various roles. They were reassigned to help out with the medical center, they were reassigned to deliver packages, they were reassigned to deliver meals. And at some point, we don't know where the infection was happening in terms of the interaction. Was the crew getting the people sick, the passengers sick, or was it the passengers who were sick, who were passing on the infection to the crew?
One evening, a couple of the friends we made that were staff came to the door, and when I opened the... When I opened the door, they were there with gowns and masks and gloves, and that's when it hit home. It's like, this thing is real, and we're in the middle of it, and how are we going to get out of it?
With the crews going from door to door, I guess there was a little bit of concern. Must not have been easy for them to, continue doing all this non-stop work while they themselves were, under the same threat as we were.
The crew are scared. One group of Indian staff plead with their government for help.
नमस्कार, मैं विनय और ये अपना साथी है। तो इस वक्त हम बहुत डरे हुए हैं। तो चेकिंग भी नहीं हुआ, क्रू का अभी तक किसी का कोई चेकिंग नहीं हुआ।
One charity, based in the Philippines, was inundated with calls from crew members asking for help. Joanna Concepcion is the chair of Migrante International, an organization that supports seafarers.
Based on the accounts shared with us by some of the seafarers, they first learned about the COVID outbreak on the ship directly from their family members who read the international news. The crew members that we were able to speak to were expressing concern and frustration over being forced to continue working. They would share with us, the management would tell them that if they refuse to continue working, that their names would be sent to the headquarters of the company in Los Angeles.
The crew hold up signs begging for help. One reads, "Don't let us get infected." The next, "We would like to go home."
We know that the crew live in quite cramped and overcrowded living accommodation, so they may have already started to infect themselves.
With no word from the cruise ship about when the crew will be quarantined, Binay Kumar posts another video.
নমস্কার, আমি এই মুহূর্তে ডায়মন্ড প্রিন্সেসে রয়েছি। ডায়মন্ড প্রিন্সেসের ক্রু রয়েছে এবং খুবই আমরা ডেঞ্জার জোনে রয়েছি। প্লিজ এই 15 কোটি ফ্যামিলি সবাই খুব চিন্তিত আর আমি খুবই ভয়ে আছি, এখন সবাই ভয়ে আছে।
But not all the crew felt able to voice their concerns so publicly. Afraid of what the consequences might be of speaking out. One daughter of a crew member agreed to talk anonymously.
Me and my siblings would try to make him understand they have to insist their rights to their health and safety. They have stopped working while they are on quarantine. We feared for his life. I also think that my dad was torn between how he is going to insist that they want to stop working, just be isolated inside their room for their safety. And he feared also that he might lose his job if he insists that they want to stop.
3 days into the lockdown, another announcement.
I've finally been notified by the Japanese Ministry of Health that an additional 41 people from the targeted screening samples on board Diamond Princess have been tested positive for coronavirus.
As the infections increase, so do Maritju's fears.
You know what? At first, we were just taking it on a day-to-day basis. And we were thinking that since we are a little bit younger and very strong, then it will not be able to touch us. We can clean it up. Yay! I have lots of practice of this at home anyway, so no problem. But every day that we wake up and the captain is saying that, oh, for today, there's 12 people who tested positive, and then the next day says, oh, for today, there's another 61. Now we're looking at ourselves and said, what if tomorrow we will be the next one? So it's a different way of looking at now.
Despite the increase in infections, the Japanese authorities insist that keeping passengers on board the ship is the right course of action.
When there's lack of information, then control measures are slower to be implemented. A lot of speculation as to how the virus spread. We knew it spread from person to person, possibly by droplets, but others also said that it could potentially be spread by aerosol, maybe even fecal oral from poor hand hygiene. And so there were many things, a lot of rumors, a lot of speculations, and so that didn't help in terms of speeding up the response.
At that time, there was no place to remove nearly 4,000 people from the ship. Japan wasn't in a state of emergency, and there were no hotels or any other public places that could house nearly 4,000 people in quarantine.
This was no consolation for the thousands trapped on the ship. Passengers vented their frustration to news organizations around the world.
Even if you are sent back to Vancouver or Canada for quarantine, it's better off than stuck in here.
The level of worries and the mental stress has reached to the maximum now.
By February the 7th, the ship has the second largest outbreak of COVID-19 in the world. People are reporting long delays in getting tested at all, even after they reported symptoms. David Abel, a 74-year-old British man travelling with his wife, begins documenting his frustrations.
What about
all of the passengers, not one of us, to my knowledge, has received any form of health check since the quarantine officers came on board that day earlier when we were in Yokohama. No health checks have been given. We haven't had our temperatures taken. We haven't been asked any more questions. Have we got a cough? Have we got a fever? Are we taking any medication to reduce our temperatures? That has not happened for days. How are the medical people able to monitor the health situation of 2,600 passengers on board?
It's 5 days since passengers were forced into a lockdown by the Japanese authorities. More and more medics arrive on the dock as over 100 passengers are confirmed to have the virus. But the worst is yet to come. The Diamond Princess cruise ship has been carrying over 2,000 passengers on a 2-week cruise around Asia. The day before the voyage was due to end, an outbreak of COVID-19 forced those on board into a lockdown. The ship is now being held at the Japanese port of Yokohama.
News crews are back. They're setting up the tents again.
6 days into the lockdown, and there are now over 130 confirmed cases of COVID-19 on board the ship. Outside of China, the Diamond Princess is harboring the largest number of coronavirus cases in the world. Information has become more sparse, and within days, the regular updates from the captain will all but cease.
Because every day we have an update from the captain on how many people were tested positive and how many are being brought out to the hospital. And then afterwards, we're not getting any more, where the updates are getting to be lesser and lesser, and we're just getting this news from our kids and from our relatives. Do you know that there's more than 100 people more who were brought out? That's the time that we know that there's been some kind of limitation now on what you can get from the outside, probably to avoid people panicking.
The captain on the Diamond Princess was very informative even before this virus had hit the ship. He'd be full of news. During the quarantine, I feel he was under a lot of strain. You could hear it in his voice. He could only tell us so much. The Japanese health authorities were in control.
8 days into the ship's lockdown, and less than a fifth of those on board have been tested for COVID-19. The Japanese authorities take those who have tested positive to hospitals around the country. As the days pass, passenger Trudy finds a new way to source information.
We could see the ambulances off our balcony, and every day there was more. And we'd look at each other, my husband and I, and say, okay, yesterday there was 5, now there's 10 ambulances out there. And one day we did count 30, and we couldn't actually see the passengers being put into the ambulances because they had tunnels everywhere. But it was just every morning you'd wake up and you'd look out and you'd say, what's it going to be today?
Each new case of COVID-19 attracts more media, and soon there are cameras from around the world camped on the dock.
We were surprised that it was such big news. I was just overwhelmed at times with the amount of attention that we got, and there were times that I was glad the internet was out and we didn't have that time and energy that we put into it.
Just looking out over the balcony of our room and seeing the media, that was amazing to me, to see how many people were out there filming our ship, phoning the passengers for interviews. It hit home. This thing is really big, and we're part of it.
Passengers become increasingly anxious. For those with underlying health conditions, prescriptions begin running out. A news team captures a Japanese sign hanging from the side of the ship. It reads, "Medicine lacking." Passengers communicate over social media, and soon, #HangInThere_Diamond_Princess is a global trend on Twitter.
So we would keep in touch with people on the ship via internet and social media, but hearing some of them then start to be affected and getting positive, and just knowing people who were getting symptoms and things like that, that was a bit scary at times, obviously.
Finally, on February the 12th, 7 days after the quarantine began, the Japanese Ministry of Health makes a statement. Passengers older than 80 and with pre-existing health conditions can finish their quarantine on land. But the requirements lack clarity, and passengers are left confused.
At one point during the second week, they were offering to take passengers off the ship. You could stay in some kind of housing unit, but I believe it was geared mostly to Japanese residents.
10 days since the Diamond Princess docked in Yokohama, and only 218 people have been taken off the ship. Despite the long days trapped on board, there are moments of fun for both passengers and crew. Hundreds of passengers have rooms with no windows and no access to fresh air, so are allowed on deck for an hour a day.
I'm out on the deck. Beautiful sunshine and the view. Nice.
They make the most of every second.
My husband and I were even joking with each other. Now, we got to relate to how our dog feels like whenever we tell our dog, let's walk. And the dog will always be screaming like that. And now it's our turn that I'm asking my husband, is it our time? Maybe we're going now. Really, I'm always looking forward to being out, having to breathe fresh air and see the world outside rather than the four walls of the cabin.
By February the 15th, almost 300 people are infected.
When we heard every time someone would knock on our door, we'd look at each other and just say, okay, is this the news? Is this the letter that tells us we're being removed and have to go into quarantine somewhere in Tokyo or outside of Tokyo? So that fear was there all the time.
After nearly a month on board, some good news for American passengers. Their government has sent a plane to bring them home. Passengers Cheryl and Paul, traveling with their family, are eager to leave their cabin.
They started calling people to go and board the buses to go to the airport, and we have been in this room on the Diamond Princess for the last 27 days. For the last 12 days, we have not stepped foot out of this door into the hallway.
It's the first country to evacuate its citizens.
About to step into the big wide world, so I have to put my mask on. Okay, here we go.
You get to go forward, hand the passport to this gentleman in the yellow. He will hand it to the State Department folks on either side, and they'll put you on a bus. The bus will take you to the airplane.
But for Mark and Jerry Jorgensen, disaster strikes. Mark, a recipient of a kidney transplant, is at high risk from COVID-19, so along with his wife, had been regularly tested for the virus. On the day they're due to leave for America, a phone call.
We got a call again from the medical office, and they wanted to come up and talk to us, which I thought was strange. And they knocked on the door, and I answered the door, and they didn't speak English at all. And they handed me a paper, and it said, due to your test results, we are going to take you off the ship and take you to the hospital. And I, of course, thought they meant me because I was the one at risk. But then I realized it wasn't me, that they were talking about my wife. And she had about an hour to pack a very small bag, and they took her away in an ambulance to a hospital in Fukushima, 4 hours away. She's the healthiest person I know, so I couldn't believe that she actually tested positive.
Mark is not allowed to go with his wife, and he will rejoin her back in America. Friend Carl has been staying in the adjoining room.
We feared for our friend. Her husband was not allowed to go with her, so he was left alone in his cabin, and we had many hours not knowing what her condition was in. She was calling us from the ambulance, but until she really got to the Fukushima hospital and had all the tests, we didn't realize she was out of danger with the virus.
Passengers remaining on the Diamond Princess plead with their respective governments to help rescue them.
Even though we're in quarantine and we're confined to our cabin, it just seems that more people are getting infected by the virus.
As days pass, more countries send repatriation flights, and more passengers are allowed to leave the ship.
Because we know that in a day or two, there will be a chartered plane coming for us. So our bags are already packed. When we were told that really for tonight, you got to be ready because the plane is already here. And that's the time that we realized that, oh, it's true.
Hello.
All our bags are packed. We're really going.
Hello.
Definitely today. Thank you for all your prayers. Started taking picture of our suitcase and singing that now our bags are packed, we're ready to go.
But the quarantine doesn't end there.
At first there was no news, and then finally came the news that yes, they were going to send a plane. As long as you tested negative, you would be allowed to get on that plane and come home, where we faced another 14 days quarantine, but it was worth it just to get home to Canada.
As some of the passengers embark on their journeys home, it's announced 2 lives have been lost. February 2020, and the Diamond Princess has the second largest outbreak of COVID-19 in the world. The infection has spread 4 times more quickly on the ship than it did in Wuhan, China, where the first outbreak began. Ona Tan and her family have been living in a windowless room and sleeping in bunk beds for the last month. Despite minimal contact with the outside world, the virus penetrates their cabin.
When I got that phone call and the person on the other end of the line was telling me, your daughter has tested positive, my mind went blank. Such a look on my face because my husband knew immediately that someone had tested positive, and all he could ask was who it was, and I could barely speak. I had to point at her to sort of say it was her. I had to tell the lady on the other end that I had to call her back. Just sort of broke down a little, I think, and was really frightened because these were obviously words I didn't want to hear.
With hundreds infected from the ship and COVID-19 spreading across the globe, scientists scramble to learn more from this outbreak. Renowned Japanese scientist Kentaro Iwata manages to secure passage onto the docked ship. Shocked at what he sees, he posts a video online.
Today, I entered into the cruise ship Diamond Princess, which is bombarded by a lot of COVID-19 infection right now. I looked into the several places inside the ship. Turned out the cruise ship was completely inadequate in terms of the infection control. But inside Princess Diamond, I was so scared. I was so scared of getting COVID-19 because there was no way to tell where the virus is. No green zone, no red zone. Everywhere could have virus and everybody was not careful about it. There was no single professional infection control person inside the ship, and there was nobody in charge of infection prevention as a professional.
18 days since the passengers' quarantine began, a third death. 2 days later, a fourth. All the fatalities so far are Japanese and over the age of 80. 38 days since the Diamond Princess first set sail. All remaining passengers disembark.
So after receiving our approval of disembarkation this morning, when we were packing, that was exciting for us because we were going home. And it's a strange feeling being in a strange land when you know there's so much going on around you and the only thing you can think about is getting back home. So packing was a release for us. It was a good feeling.
The Princess Cruise Liner issues all passengers a full refund and a free future cruise.
Bye bye, 公主號. Bye bye 啦.
I believe Princess Cruises did everything that they knew how to do at that time, or at this time, in order to help us. Emotional support, mental health aid to anybody who required it.
But for the crew, their quarantine is only just beginning. As they embark on another 14 days of isolation, it's announced another 2 people have died. A woman from Japan and a British man. The death toll now stands at 6. The crew remain fearful, as at least 150 of them have been infected with the virus.
Princess Cruises told the crew that they would be receiving all the compensation that they worked for during the entire period of the quarantine. And many of the crew members, while they are grateful for this, are concerned that would not be enough to sustain their families' needs, given the uncertainties that they are now facing, that they might not be able to return back to work.
It's not until March the 1st, 6 weeks after the ship set sail, that the crew, along with Captain Gennaro Armour, leave the ship. He makes a speech to the crew.
I have no words to express my gratitude for what you have done. We will miss you. We'll be thinking of you.
The captain is praised for his handling of the crisis. Honor Tan, along with her daughter Kate, who soon recovers from the virus, make posters in support of the captain.
The captain was really reassuring, and we could hear his emotions in his voice and his caring nature in the way he would speak to us, and we felt all that support coming from him.
Captain Armour has managed to stay free from COVID-19 and is soon on his way home to Italy. As crew and passengers return to their 56 respective countries, the World Health Organization declares COVID-19 a global pandemic. By now, the global death toll is reported to be over 4,000. Conversations now turn to how officials from both the Princess Group and the Japanese government allowed the coronavirus to spread so aggressively it infected 712 people.
I cannot believe one person can cause 600 and something odd people to get sick.
The ship's company says they were taking instructions from the government on how to impose quarantine measures and how to prevent infection on board. The government says they were faced with an unprecedented situation, and they too were trying to prevent more infection on board and trying to save lives.
With COVID-19, of course, there's an added level of complication because this is a new disease caused by a new virus, great amount of fear, a lot of uncertainty. So that probably led to some delay in how the health authorities in Japan responded to the outbreak.
Less than 2 months after the quarantine ends, it's announced 14 passengers from the Diamond Princess have died.
But I think what this particular infection has shown them is that really these ships are not designed and they're not managed to be able to deal with such an infection. I think the biggest lesson that has been learnt or will be learnt from this is that in actual fact they should never have really stayed on board and been quarantined on board. They should have actually either gone on and be repatriated, probably would have saved more infections and possibly lives.
Despite the outbreak on the Diamond Princess, the Princess fleet continues to sail. Passengers on the Sun Princess cruise are targeted by angry locals on the island of Réunion. Concerned the ship will bring COVID-19 ashore. The Sun Princess, along with 3 other Princess cruise liners, are infected with the virus. In total, 41 passengers die. The Ruby Princess, docked in Australia, is the worst of them, with 21 deaths. The Australian government is now launching a criminal investigation.
So what about the future of cruising? In terms of the disease control, I think, the ideal thing, if we just focus on COVID-19, the thing that we really need is a vaccine. And the sooner we get there, the better it is.